Now, the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town is taking the Home Affairs Department to court for blocking identity documents. It says more than 100 people have fallen victim to what they term an arbitrary ID blocking practice by the department. Well, back in 2020, Home Affairs Minister Dr. Liesl told Parliament that they were dealing with more than 800,000 blocked ID cases, this involving alleged duplicates and documents acquired fraudulently. So for more on this story, we're now joined by senior attorney Liesl Muller, who's involved in this matter. Liesl, a very warm good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps give us some clarity in terms of background context. I mean, when did this particular issue start?
Yes, these issues have been around for about 10 years now. The department started their digitization process in approximately 2015, and then they were able to, see on their system where things may look like a suspicious activity or a suspicious ID. And then without doing an investigation, and this is the important part, blocked those IDs for which an investigation was then supposed to follow. But what we found then is that in the 10 or 8 years since, these cases have just not been finalized. And then what happens is that they all have children who are then affected by their parents' inability to now care for them financially, emotionally, and importantly, those children's births are not registered.
Yeah, the problem with a birth not being registered is that your identity is very much deemed invincible, according to the state. How problematic is this, Liesl?
Yes, it's one of the first things that the Constitution gives a child, the right to a name and a nationality from birth. And the reason is that your legal personhood must be acknowledged for you to start a life in which you can go to school, access health care, dream, one day when you need to go to university. And this is the kind of thing that children, especially in South Africa, need to be able to get education and to live the life that perhaps some of their parents couldn't. And so it's incredibly important for children themselves, but also for South Africa as a society, we believe.
Yeah. Take me through perhaps some of the submissions, therefore, that have been made so far in court. I know the Children's Institute, also part of those taking, the Home Affairs Department to court. We've heard from the Minister, saying that the reason for this 800,000 backlog of IDs still being blocked is because there is fraudulent activity associated to them. There's also some duplicates when it comes to these IDs, but surely there are submissions being made against what the Minister's, arguments are.
So, yes, the Constitution in Article or Section 33 gives every one of us the right to administrative justice. And so what that means is that when a state organ makes a decision which will affect your human rights, you have the right to be informed in writing and to be given reasons and then also to respond. And so what we're saying is that if the department suspects fraud, they must inform that person and start an investigation. And only once the investigation is finalized can they block and cancel the ID and whatever comes with that. But what we're saying is that they've jumped the gun in blocking first. And there's no reason why they can't flag these IDs and keep doing the investigations without already punishing those people with a blocked ID before it's even been decided. And myself, I have dealt with cases of legitimate South Africans who had no fraud and involved and who were blocked for up to 10 years without being able to access the bank account. The most important submission that we as the Centre for Child Law representing the Children's Institute is making is that in every case that affects a child, the state organ must take into account how it will affect that child, the child that is the child of a caregiver. And the Constitutional Court has said time and again that we cannot just be making decisions left and right if we're not considering how it will affect a child. And so we're saying that Home Affairs' conduct is unconstitutional merely for the fact that they did not take into account how it will affect children.
Well, Liesl, also under the same breath, is there a possibility that when it comes to the duplication of ID documents, this for the parents, that it could possibly be the Department of Home Affairs error? It could be an error on their side that they have to fix, as opposed to placing, this burden on parents not having their IDs, now children being affected, and also did they take accountability of that possibility?
So it's very interesting because there's a historical context. In '94, when people applied for IDs to be able to vote, there was also people in the TBVC states who had IDs that were it signed ID numbers without them knowing, and then they would apply again. So yes, absolutely, there is a lot of administrative errors involved, and Home Affairs does acknowledge that in their papers, but then they say that it is the responsibility of that person to come forward. But it's not necessarily true that that person might even know that they have a duplicate. And importantly, the fact that there's no process for you to resolve your blocked ID means that you might come forward and not get a result. So yes, there is a lot of clerical errors. Some of our clients whose stories we tell, some are recorded as having died when they are quite clearly alive. Some have, two people have the same ID number. And of course, there might be fraud involved, but it might not. One person is innocent, of course.
Yeah.
But both are blocked.
Right. Just before I let you go, Liesl, because, the focus as well is on the impact on children. I just want to ask you, in a situation whereby a child is orphaned, and, we've heard from the Department of Home Affairs in terms of the list of demands and, wanting the parents obviously to come to party and make it in resolving this issue. But the parents or the mother is deceased and the child still doesn't have, that ID documentation, birth certificate, no form of identity, and has no recourse because now the parents have deceased and they're orphaned. What happens in this context to these children?
Yes, so Home Affairs in their papers are saying, well, the parents must just resolve their problem, and then the children will also have a solution. But we're saying that the Constitution looks as children as full human beings, independent of their parents. So we're saying that that child has their own right to a birth certificate. And as you say, if you're an orphan child, there's just no hope for you because you can't take your parent to Home Affairs to resolve their ID. And then what happens to children who are outside of the family structure, like these children? It holds a whole range of rights, like adoption becomes difficult. Getting a SASSA grant is impossible. Going to school is a challenge. So that child who is already traumatized or made vulnerable is now doubly vulnerable without a birth certificate.
Yeah, it sounds like the cycle of harm then is perpetuated, and it's never ending. It's more like a vicious cycle. But thank you so much, Liesl, for speaking to me about this. We understand that, of course, the hearing has also been set for the 20th and 21st of September. Liesl Muller, senior attorney at the Centre for Child Law, joining us, giving us some context as to when exactly this problem started, approximately about 10 years ago. But also we see the cycle with which now it impacts on the constitutional right of the child to have their own identity, and that in turn affecting them getting a driver's license, a grant, going to school. And this matter, of course, will continue to be heard between them and the Department of Home Affairs.